Bruce Feiler, pleasure to have you on.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
So everybody is aware that there's something going on in the workforce. You know, there was during pandemic, there was that great resignation where people just dropped out. There is this whole work from home thing where people are stubbornly resisting the idea of going back to work, all of which suggests some kind of dissatisfaction with the old work model. And what's interesting to me is you've been onto this earlier than most of us because you've been researching this book. Tell me what led you, what took you to this place of asking what is going on in the workforce and why are people unhappy?
Well, I think that's a great frame for this conversation. So as you say, I've spent the last 6 years helping people navigate life transitions. At this point, I have crisscrossed the country multiple times, collecting hundreds of life stories of Americans of all backgrounds, all walks of life, all 50 states. And basically what I've been doing is looking for clues for how people can find meaning in times of change. And as you say, no area of our life is changing more than work. So let's just set the table here. 70% of Americans are unhappy with what they do. 75% of Americans in a survey released in April say they plan to look for new work this year. That means 100 million Americans in a workforce of 160 million will sit across from someone today, tonight, tomorrow and say, I'm not happy with what I'm doing. I want to do work that makes me happy.
Is it possible for everyone to have work with meaning? Because I feel like this is something that people like us talk about a lot, because what we do, I mean, honestly, is great fun. I can't believe people pay me to do this, right? And Scott Galloway says, this whole idea of telling young people you have to find your passion when you're 20 or 21 is kind of nonsense. You've got, you know, find something you're pretty good at, try to do it well, you know, try to move up and get more responsibility, and that becomes more fun. What do you make of that argument?
I agree that follow your passion is one of the worst pieces of career advice. I, in fact, asked everybody, did you follow your passion, you know, discover your passion or make your passion? 9 out of 10 people did not follow their passion. Your passions change. The world change. Along comes circumstances. Something happens to you medically. Here comes AI. So the idea of locking into a passion early is a preposterously bad piece of advice. But what I do think is true is that people across the income spectrum care about meaning. But the question, and I think the opening and what I've tried to offer here, is how do you decide what gives you meaning when that's going to change over time?
And what is the answer to that?
The people who are happiest and most fulfilled in what they do, they don't just climb, they also dig. They perform what I call a meaning audit, where they do personal archaeology, like this treasure hunt through their own life story, trying to figure out. And so what I offer in this book is this
trying
toolkit.
To figure out what it is that they like, what it is that makes them happy, what is it that gives them purpose.
Today, not 2 years ago, not 10 years ago, not what your parents wanted, not what you thought you wanted, but what you're doing right now. I'm in a moment in my life when. Okay, I'm in a moment in my life when I need to make money because my kids are going to college, or I have newborns and I want to spend more time with my children, or I want to travel more, or I'm an empty nester and now I want to do something for myself. The point is that your who, your what, your when, they change over time, and this is the great opportunity of the nonlinear work life. When you're going to go through 20 of these work quakes in your life, any one can be a moment to reimagine.
But I think what you're really saying is that we're going through one of these big transitions, yes. that nothing is going to flip back to what it looked like 10 years ago.
Yes.
That these trends that we see, the work from home, the great resignation, this is all part of a much broader phenomenon. So 5-10 years from now, you think the workplace will look, the careers will look completely different, and how?
I absolutely think it is that big of a change. So I think what's happening here is a kind of rebalancing of the power between the worker, and the workforce. And so really what I'm, offering people here is this opportunity to meet actual real people. I mean, I tell this story, as you know, in the introduction. It's one of my favorite stories of a woman named Roy Park, okay, who was on the Soviet desk of the CIA, like at the most prestigious. And she made a transition within the CIA to leave the spy department to go to the bureaucracy side and run payroll. Like her friend said, you are a fool. What did she do? She ended up running the entire CIA. And every story, Fareed, has what I call like the unright decision. The decision that sort of disappoints somebody, but it's the decision that is ultimately true to yourself. And that's the burden, but it's the opportunity of this moment to decide what story you want to tell.
Bruce Feiler, pleasure to have you on.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It's a fascinating book. My thanks to Bruce Feiler, and thanks to all of you for being part of my program this week. I will see you next week.